Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Cross-border trips down. The sharp drop in British Columbians driving into the U.S. as the world braces for more of Donald Trump's tariffs. Plus,
it's fantastic today. I really surprised today.
BC buries its consumer carbon tax, but some drivers wonder how much they may actually save.
It was this price 2 weeks ago, so where's our savings? It's ridiculous.
It's not really a good deal.
And
it was a gun that was captured during the First World War and then brought back to Vancouver to be displayed as a war trophy.
Booming discovery. A piece of Canadian military history is unearthed in Hastings Park.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. As President Donald Trump gets set to unveil more global tariff plans on Wednesday, we're getting a clearer picture of the icy relationship between Canada and the U.S. New data shows a significant drop in traffic across the BC border. Justin McElroy reports.
While U.S. President Donald Trump's rhetoric towards Canada has softened in recent weeks, it appears British Columbians' attitudes towards going south of the border has only hardened. That's according to data we now have showing southbound border crossings over the last month compared to March of 2024. And you can see it is a big drop, whereas Americans, U.S. license plates going southbound from Canada, are basically the same from 2024. Overall, during the course of the year, you can see the trend line dropping from basically being average in January to down a fair bit in February, then a lot in March, 42% in total. Of course, all of this could get better or worse in terms of sentiment tomorrow when the U.S. government is expected to announce tariffs not just to Canada, but across the world, which could be more or less than people anticipate right now. The BC government says all counter responses are on the table.
We are working as a Team Canada approach. We've been working closely with the federal government for the last month on reciprocal tariffs, providing them feedback on what should work, what we perhaps don't want to be doing. The goal is to ensure that we are having an impact on the U.S., but minimizing as much of the impact on British Columbia and Canada. That's the goal. We're going to support the federal government's decision when it gets rolled out, when President Trump announces his tariffs.
Of course, the BC government originally wanted to make it very quick for themselves to put forward some of these regulations, but last week backtracked from their proposed bill after criticism that it would be overreach and government by cabinet instead of legislature. So it might take time for them, as well as the British Columbian people, to decide their next steps after those tariffs tomorrow are announced. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Victoria.
After 17 years, the BC government has officially killed the consumer carbon tax, finished off after a marathon debate at the legislature that went into the early hours of the morning. Premier David Eby says drivers will see relief at the gas pumps. But as Jessica Chung explains, some have concerns.
Is the price at the pump lower now that BC has scrapped the consumer carbon tax? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I'm outside a Shell and a Super Save gas station, and they're both hovering just above $1.70 per liter. Now that's a drop from what it was yesterday, when prices in the Lower Mainland were hovering in the $1.80 range, and it came as a welcome surprise for many drivers filling up this morning.
I was so surprised. Yeah, I just thought, oh my God, they're going to be $1.90, and I looked over here, oh, they're only $1.70. That's great.
It's fantastic today. I really surprised today.
If you can make some savings somewhere, then you can spend it somewhere else, and it just makes everything a lot more livable.
And some drivers weren't fooled. They say that they've noticed that prices have been creeping up over the past 10 days, spiking to well over $1.90 at some pumps. And many were weary about the timing of it all, as the increase came after the province announced it would scrap the consumer carbon tax.
It was this price 2 weeks ago, so where's our savings? It's ridiculous.
We saw it being $177 for super long time, and then it jumps up to like $190, and we're like, okay, like what's going on? And then all of a sudden it jumps back down. It's like, and then it makes us feel like, oh, we're getting a good deal, but you know, it's not really a good deal.
It seems like they jacked the price the last couple of weeks. Was there a coincidence that it was also the carbon tax was going to be taken off? So this is basically just going back to what it was 2 weeks ago.
Prices also fluctuate seasonally. They go up as we head towards the summer as refineries switch over.
Premier David Eby addressed the issue yesterday. He says he's noticed the price increase himself. He didn't confirm that there was actual price gouging happening, but he did say that measures are in place to catch it if it is. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
Construction for the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain expansion is ramping up, and that is meaning closures. Crews have shut down a busy stretch of Fraser Highway in Surrey as they build overhead. As John Hernandez shows us, it's a milestone for a project still years away from completion.
Major construction means a major road closure. A 500-meter stretch of Fraser Highway cut off for at least 6 months as crews begin work on the multi-billion-dollar SkyTrain extension.
It's going to be an incredible project, and so we know it's a bit of an inconvenience for motorists.
The Surrey-Langley SkyTrain will add 16 kilometers to the current Expo line, connecting King George Station to the future Langley City Centre Station. Crews have closed off this stretch of Fraser Highway at the Green Timbers Urban Forest until October. There will also be intermittent overnight closures nearby as required. Detours in effect early Tuesday. Increased road congestion already noticeable for drivers like Bob Humphrey, who dropped his wife off at this adjacent urgent care center during rush hour.
It's ugly. It's ugly and very busy. The way we had to come today to get here.
The province calls the congestion a necessary pain for long-term gain along the increasingly busy Fraser Highway.
This project is going to significantly increase the capacity of the SkyTrain system. It'll be able to accommodate more than 50,000 riders a day.
For the SkyTrain to go to Langley, where I live, bonus. Better traveling, less probably cars for sure.
With much of the route being built above ground, there will be more closures along the highway. And with the project still years away from completion, transit activists are calling for increased bus service in the interim.
The extension is going to finish in 2029, so within those 4 years, what are we doing to address the overcrowding crisis in Surrey? We have 13 of the 20 most overcrowded buses in our region.
The province says operational funding talks with TransLink are underway, but it isn't making any promises as it forges ahead with this $6 billion project. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
BC Hydro is offering you a new flat rate option as an alternative to the traditional tiered rate system of electricity use. Right now, Hydro charges customers more when they go over a set amount of power. Tier 1 is $11.72 per kilowatt hour for the first 675 kilowatt hours in a 30-day billing period. Tier 2 kicks in after that. That's $14.08 per kilowatt hour. Under the flat rate system, all electricity, no matter how much you use, would cost $12.63 per kilowatt hour.
On average, switching to the flat rate, a customer could save about $60 per year, but that's going to depend on how much electricity they use, the size of their home, where they are in the province, how cold it gets.
Customers can also look into time of day billing options as rates are lower overnight. Hydro says the flat rate is good for households that use more power, like those with baseboard heaters and heat pumps. Well, there were long lines outside Vancouver City Hall earlier in the day for the last day of advance polls in the municipal by-election. 2 seats on City Council are up for grabs after former One City Councillor Christine Boyle was elected as a provincial NDP MLA and former Green Councillor Adrienne Carr announced she was retiring. The outcome of the vote will not change the balance of power on council, though. Mayor Ken Sim's governing ABC party already holds a majority. Days after a massive earthquake devastated Myanmar and parts of Thailand, a workshop has been held in Vancouver's Chinatown to prepare people there for a big quake. As Pinky Wong reports, the area has some of the oldest buildings in the city.
A simulation of what you should do when an earthquake happens. The Yarrow Intergenerational Society for Justice spent a day with the Chinese-speaking seniors in Vancouver's Chinatown, getting them ready for shakes big and small. They say there's a higher risk of damage to many old buildings around downtown Eastside and Chinatown if an earthquake strikes. And that is why it is important for them to educate seniors in languages they're comfortable with.
Although they have been living here for a long time, they've been in their community for so long, and they mainly speak different forms of Chinese. They speak Cantonese with each other, they speak Mandarin with each other, and that shouldn't, be a barrier for them to get this really life-saving information.
Not everyone knows how vulnerable BC is to earthquakes. And this educator says some residents have also learned different techniques of earthquake preparedness that is not applicable to BC.
Most importantly, that they've unlearned some things that they had previously been taught that might not have been safe or correct. People believing that they should run from a building. So here, doing the drop, cover, hold on, or the safe adaptation is the most important thing.
This participant says she learned to drop, cover, and hold instead of what she saw on some Chinese social media telling her to hold onto a wall.
Useful, very useful.
She says she will be preparing her emergency grab-and-go bag after learning what to include in it today.
Organizers also prepared some essentials for participants to take home, like this flashlight and a whistle. So this participant here, Ivy Lam, just told me today she learned a lot, and a lot of information she found useful because she felt the earthquake last time that happened in Vancouver. But right now she feels like she'll know how to do and what to do if such event is to happen again.
Organizers say they're advocating for more resources to be translated into various languages and will be training staff to deliver more non-English workshops. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
Our science and climate specialist Darius Madavi is here with a look at the weather. There's sun outside, blue sky.
Isn't that crazy?
What's going on?
This is what happens. I come back and the sun comes out. Yes, we've got
all right, Angel.
We've got a few showers across parts of the south coast, parts of the east coast of the island, seeing some of those showers, maybe popping into parts, more southern parts of the lower mainland as well. But those showers are really going to only continue overnight tonight before tapering off and really being over after that. Maybe some more showers pop up tomorrow overnight on parts of the South Island and the lower mainland, but for the most part, we're looking dry, we're looking sunny, and that's going to continue over the next few days as temperatures continue to climb as well, especially once we get into the weekend.
Okay. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Imagine this. A piece of Canadian military history has been dug up in Hastings Park. PNE officials say construction crews uncovered a First World War artillery piece. More now from Michelle Morton.
It's not what crews working on the new amphitheater were expecting to unearth. A link between the Canadian military and Hastings Park.
The team was excavating and actually hit something. They picked it up or was able to lift it with a crane and discovered it was what was initially described as a cannon. We've been told now that the correct term is a military field munition.
Archivists say during the First World War, Hastings Park was used as a training and recruitment center for Vancouver. And this artillery found last Thursday is actually German, not Canadian.
It was a gun that was captured during the First World War and then brought back to Vancouver to be displayed as a war trophy.
He says there were others like this one put on display throughout the city, such as the gun shown on this postcard that was captured by the Seaforth Highlanders in 1918 and displayed in front of Stanley Park for years.
In between the First and Second World War, they no longer wanted to have these in public parks. They were starting to rust, and it was a depression, and they weren't sure who was going to maintain them. So they collected them all at Hastings Park, but eventually they cut them up for scrap for the Second World War, and most of them were turned into Liberty ships during the Second World War.
He says in the 1940s, there was speculation in newspaper articles that guns were buried because they were so big and difficult to move. But the mystery was, who did it? Calhoun now hopes the gun that was in Stanley Park might be found in Hastings Park.
It wasn't marked as being destroyed on the war trophies list, and we think that there might be others there as well. So that's sort of the next mystery that needs to be solved.
Calhoun says they've been in touch with the city's archaeologist and PNE staff in hopes of using ground-penetrating radar in the search. In the meantime, this piece of artillery is being returned to the Canadian military in Vancouver as a museum piece. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Liberal leader Mark Carney is taking credit for killing the federal carbon tax, but Pierre Poilievre says he hasn't gone far enough. More from the federal campaign trail after this. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre reaffirmed his commitment to expanding Canada's energy sector while campaigning in St. John's today.
We're going to unleash the production of our resources. We're going to support doubling oil and gas production here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're going to back the offshore by repealing C-69, the No New Pipelines law, repealing the energy cap, repealing the entire carbon tax.
Poilievre promised to enact 5 recommendations put forward by the country's energy sector if his party forms government, and he pledged to end Canada's dependence on the U.S. market in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs. Poilievre accuses Liberal leader Mark Carney of blocking the energy sector's expansion.
On my first day as Prime Minister, I ended the consumer carbon tax. Today, that change takes effect.
Mark Carney announced the official end of the federal consumer carbon tax on day 10 of his campaign in Winnipeg. Scrapping it was his first act as Prime Minister. He's also promising a middle-class tax cut, helping first-time home buyers afford a home, and expanding dental coverage to more people. Carney is expected back in Ottawa on Wednesday in his role as Prime Minister ahead of the U.S. tariff announcement.
Our Canadian healthcare system is not for sale and will never be for sale. New Democrats will ensure that.
And that's NDP leader Jagmeet Singh pushing back against what he calls American-style health care during a campaign stop in Edmonton. He says New Democrats would ban U.S. corporations from buying up Canadian healthcare facilities, and he's vowing to crack down on clinics that charge Canadians for basic health services. Singh accuses the Conservatives of backing the expansion of for-profit care and also slams the Liberals for being soft on provinces like Ontario and Alberta that push private care models. As we heard, Mark Carney is taking credit for ending the federal consumer carbon levy, but Pierre Poilievre says that does not go far enough. Alexander Silberman has more on how it's playing out on the campaign trail.
I mean, it's a relief, obviously, but
Canadians across the country waking up to a drop in prices at the pump.
it helps everybody, be more affordable because it's been kind of crazy lately.
The consumer carbon tax ending at midnight, lowering gas by more than 17 cents per liter after Mark Carney canceled the fee on his first day as Prime Minister last month.
Today, that change takes effect.
On the campaign trail, taking credit for the cheaper gas prices.
I'm a pragmatist. So when I see something that doesn't make sense, something that doesn't work, I change it.
Carney initially supported the tax, but changed course while campaigning for the Liberal leadership.
Axe the tax!
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who made the tax a central part of his platform, claiming the Liberals will reinstate the full tax with no rebate after the election, and promising to also end the remaining industrial price on carbon.
Up until about 2 months ago, the Liberals said that if we didn't have a carbon tax, the whole planet would be lit aflame.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh calling for protections to keep costs from climbing back up.
Let's watch very closely and see if these oil and gas companies jack up prices now.
The industrial price on carbon remains and could drive up to half of Canada's emission reductions by 2030, according to this expert.
The industrial system is only adding something like a timbit worth of cost per barrel of oil generated. So the costs are low, even though the incentives, if these policies are designed right, remain really high.
The future of the industrial carbon price is now facing political headwinds, creating uncertainty for investors in emissions reduction projects, with many waiting to see what might happen after the election. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Ottawa.
There it is, spring skiing up on the hills of Blackcomb Mountain. A touch of snow still falling up high, but plenty of sun is coming this week. Darius has your BC-wide forecast coming up.
This is Vancouver is a new CBC podcast where we explore the issues, the stories, and the people that make this place home. Listen to This is Vancouver wherever you get your podcasts.
In less than 24 hours, Donald Trump's ongoing tariff threats appear poised to become a reality. Those levies could fundamentally reshape the Canada-U.S. relationship. That's causing concern with voters and politicians here, but also some Republican lawmakers there. Katie Simpson explains.
On Capitol Hill, there's a long-shot effort to try to kill some of the tariffs placed on Canada.
The president has justified the imposition of these tariffs on, in my view, a made-up emergency.
Canadians got a right to be pissed. We got a responsibility to step up as bipartisan members of the Senate and say no.
Senate Democrats drafting a resolution to end the national emergency Donald Trump declared in order to impose 25% tariffs on Canada related to border security and fentanyl. But they need help from the Republican majority to get it passed.
We're asking for 4 Republican senators to actually go on record what they've all said privately. They're aghast at the tariffs.
Republican Senators Rand Paul, Susan Collins, and Tom Tillis are expected to support the measure, prompting Trump to step in, lashing out on social media, writing, "Don't let the Democrats have a victory. It would be devastating for the Republican Party." Even if it passes the Senate, the resolution is expected to be stopped by the Republican-controlled House, meaning it would be a symbolic loss for Trump, intended to be an embarrassment as he fires the next shot in his global trade war.
April 2nd, 2025 will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history.
As of Tuesday afternoon, the president was still finalizing his tariff plan.
He's with his trade and tariff team right now, perfecting it to make sure this is a perfect deal for the American people and the American worker.
Trump says these tariffs will be based on fairness, reciprocal tariffs on countries that impose taxes on U.S. goods or have trading barriers deemed unfair to American companies. After months of threats, the world will finally learn which countries and industries will be hit hardest.
Katie Simpson reporting from Washington. Maple syrup producers in Quebec, meanwhile, are getting increasingly worried about incoming U.S. tariffs. Vanessa Lee shows us how the potential levies could tap into the bottom line of Canada's most iconic export.
Maple sap has been flowing from trees at Hall Acres Farm since the 1860s.
This is product and we're going to push it through the filter press.
David Hall is a 5th-generation maple syrup producer.
And we only produce 20 to 25 days a year.
Livelihoods largely dependent on weather are now tapped into even more uncertainty. A 25% across-the-board tariff on Canadian imports is set to take effect in days. Last year, $450 million worth of maple syrup was sent to the U.S. That's 62% of Quebec's maple exports.
Are people going to stop buying syrup in the U.S.? Probably not. Will they buy less? Probably. We're going to have meetings with the buyers and see what we can do. But, you know, to say that the producers were going to get 25% less, none of us would be in business.
Across the Quebec border, Vermont is the top producer of maple syrup in the U.S. The markets are highly interconnected. American farmers rely on supplies and equipment made in Canada.
It's crucial because they manufacture just about everything that we use, from our pipeline to gather the syrup to the tanks that we store it in.
Vermont's Maple Sugar Makers Association worries all of the tariff uncertainty could lead to price hikes and shortages on American shelves, stalling growth in the industry.
Vermont and the U.S. don't make enough maple syrup to fulfill the needs of our domestic market. So it's important to the value of the U.S. industry that we have an adequate and appropriately priced supply of Canadian syrup.
My biggest fear in all of this is that we might lose track of the fact that we're neighbors and we're friends.
It takes decades for maple trees to grow big enough to tap, making it impossible to replace Canada's famous export overnight, as farmers on both sides of the border set their focus on production over politics. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Brome Lake, Quebec.
The U.S. Attorney General has directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione. He is charged with murder in the December shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York City. Attorney General Pam Bondi called it a, quote, premeditated, cold-blooded assassination. Mangione's defense team calls Bondi's decision, quote, a political move. The clock is ticking for you to file your taxes. They're due for individuals in Canada by April 30th. But imagine if you're new to this country. So volunteers at Diverse City, a social service agency, are helping newcomers file their taxes, if they have to do them, until April 16th. We're now joined by Catherine Sim. She's the Diverse City's annual income tax clinic manager. Catherine, thanks for joining us. First of all, what are some of the common challenges newcomers to Canada face when filing taxes?
Honestly, the two primary challenges are language barriers and a lack of information. And with the language barriers, the one fabulous thing about Diversity is that we can provide language support in pretty much every language that we face.
And just to clarify, at what point does a newcomer to Canada actually have to start filing taxes?
They can file them within the first year that they arrive.
How many people use Diversity's service every year?
Last year, we filed over 1,000 tax returns, which was incredible. And the average refund for that was about $475. It means that some of our clients are now accessing the BC renters tax credit, which is really important, the child tax benefit, the GST credit, all of those things they would not be able to access if we weren't helping them fill in their tax return. And part of that is just a lack of information, a lack of knowledge. And that's what we come in and we're sharing our knowledge, supporting them in that process, and potentially encouraging them to do it on their own the following year.
Yeah. You mentioned a number of tax credits. Are there others that newcomers may be eligible for that they don't know about?
To be honest, they don't know about a lot of them. So, and this is where the language barrier comes in. So our job is to sit down, outline everything that is available to them. It's based on what their immigration status is. That can affect what they can apply for. So our job is to share that knowledge with them.
What sort of reaction do you get generally from newcomers who realize they actually are going to get some money back?
Well, I mean, what kind of reaction do you get from anybody these days who's getting money back? People are happy. It can be a stressful exercise because there's paperwork and tax slips and new systems, but we try and make that as easy as possible. We always have language support volunteers at every single clinic. The entire clinic is run by volunteers, which is incredible. So this year we have about 30 volunteers doing that for us.
And for those watching and perhaps thinking that this could help a friend or a newcomer, a new neighbor, what languages do you offer, and what can people expect when they show up at the door?
Well, okay, so a couple things. One, if they want to fill in, if they want to do their taxes, they can go to our website, which is dcrs.ca. And on the front page, there is a link directly to book an appointment. Those appointments will either be at Diversity itself or at one of the 4 Surrey library locations that we have partnered with. The common languages that we're providing support in are Dari, Pashto, Arabic, Swahili, and English. But with any advance notice, we can literally find a volunteer to provide support in any language.
Wow. Catherine Sim, Diversity's annual income tax clinic manager. We appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you so much.
Half a century ago today, many Canadians were scratching their heads as the weather was given to them in metric for the very first time, out with Fahrenheit and in with Celsius. We look back at the change that wasn't always so smooth. Next. 50 years ago, a lot of Canadians were doing math in their heads when the weather was delivered to them in metric. Out with Fahrenheit and in with Celsius. It's been a marked difference with our neighbors in the United States ever since. So how did we get here? We take a look back at the bumpy road that was metrification.
For some of us Canadians, the metric system is all we've ever known. Temperature in Celsius, gas in liters, cereal by the gram. But it wasn't always that way, and converting from imperial to metric was a long and bumpy process. So why did Canada make the switch?
Why? Why did this metric system come in?
I think it's going to be great.
Celsius, what is it?
It all started in 1970. The main benefit of the metric system is it follows a simple rule of decimal structure. That makes it easy to go from small units to big units without having complicated conversion factors in between.
I'm still old enough to remember pence and shilling and pounds, and one needed to know the conversion in between. And the same goes for miles and yards and feet and inches.
Europe had deep roots in the metric system, which started in France in the late 18th century. The UK, founders of the British imperial system in the early 19th century, made the switch to metric in 1965, just years before joining the European Union. Countries around the world followed. So in 1971, Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's Liberal government formed the Metric Commission.
The government has stopped short of legislating a compulsory changeover. The reason? This gets Ottawa off the hook, paying the costs of conversion. A 1971 white paper just says the metric system is advisable and inevitable. As this board shows, every day, somewhere in Canada, one of 60-odd committees is discussing the problems of metrication. It could be the new sizes of tomato juice cans, sugar packaging, or screws and nails used in construction. By 1980, for all practical purposes, Canada will be a metric economy.
With that, they set out to inform Canadians, but not all of their marketing campaigns went over well, like this ad in the early 70s.
In sexist days of yore, a woman's figure was given a linear translation by a tape measure. Well, the Metric Commission thought that was a good idea, so they produced a poster with a young woman on it and a caption reading, "Girls measuring 90, 60, 90 are inevitable." The Women's Division of the Department of Labor didn't think that was such a good idea, and the poster was pulled. So now we'll have to learn our metrics another way.
There was one other massive issue: the United States, Canada's largest trading partner. Americans had thought about switching to metric too, but President Gerald Ford made it voluntary. And many didn't want to deal with the hassle and money, so the imperial system continued on. The head of Canada's Metric Commission expected that would make things harder for Canadians.
It's going to be a tremendous temptation always to think in the customary terms of inches and pounds and yards and so forth, and then to convert, or to convert from the metric to the yards to understand it. That's inefficient, and you have to try to train yourself not to do it.
Think about all the mental math you'd have to do as things changed around you.
The big problem is that the old sizes come out to odd figures in the metric system. 25 pounds of dog food, for example, is 11.34 kilograms, and if we're going to get nice, neat calculations, the package sizes are going to have to be changed. The toothpaste people have taken the plunge in advance. Those tubes, you see, are all in even numbers of milliliters. The housewife, well, it seems she goes by giant economy size or whatever. She simply doesn't pay too much attention to measurements anyway.
Do you pay any attention to this labeling when you buy things at the store?
No, I don't. Well, eventually I work in a hospital, and that's what we're doing now here in the metric system.
As the last shopper noted, the hospitals are well in the front. More than 60% have changed over already. The old apothecaries' measures are disappearing fast. These weights are already getting corroded. They're kept only as curiosities. 2 drams, this one says. And as for the smaller ones, the pharmacists have thrown their scruples to the wind and measure in milligrams. Upstairs in the nursery, the change is also complete. It may come as a shock to the new fathers and mothers, but their infants are being weighed in grams. This one at 3,830.
Now a look at the weather picture for our CBO morning listening area.
Canada's weather reporting officially switched over to the metric system on April Fool's Day in 1975. Yes, April Fools. Environment Canada awkwardly tested the new system as a severe storm hit the Maritimes. People woke up confused and frustrated.
Well, it doesn't make much sense, so.
At the time, David Phillips had just started at the Government Weather Service a few years earlier.
We were kind of almost the guinea pig. The one product that Canadians look at every day is the weather forecast. And so if we can get the weather forecast to be in metric, then Canadians will at least kind of get used to it. By September of that year, we'll go with precipitation. We'll be in centimeters for snow, rain for millimeters, and then later on it would be kilometers when speedometers changed over.
Phillips isn't too sure why the campaign was launched on April Fool's Day, but says it was probably tied to the government's bureaucratic calendar year, which starts each April.
I remember walking by that little group that was preparing it and doing it, and they had kind of like egg on their face. I mean, I don't think they really thought of it.
By 1977, all Canadian weather reporting used metric measurements. To help Canadians transition, forecasts featured helpful hints.
We said, you get 5 millimeters of rain in the forecast today. Well, that's going to wet your car. Or, 10 millimeters, well, you won't have to water your lawn today. And 50 millimeters, oh my gosh, you'll be going through ponds and splashing and soakers and roadways will be covered with water. Everything was blamed on metrication. If you didn't feel well, you said it was metrication. If you got a lousy storm or the weather turned bad, it was not climate change, it was metrication that was at fault.
By 1977, all road signs had to use kilometers.
We feel that by September 6th, people in Saskatchewan will be prepared for metric. The Highway Traffic Board will be gazetting the speeds in metric, and I'm afraid that if he's speeding no matter what units you're using.
And there were the gas pumps. The government wanted Canadians to use liters by 1979.
Compared to $1 a gallon for gasoline, the price of Grasswood Esso in Saskatoon seems very appealing, only 21.3 cents. But that price is for liters, something that will become commonplace as service stations across Canada convert their pumps to the metric system. Consumers will have to get used to a new price for a different quantity of gas. That may be a nuisance for some people, but it shouldn't cause any real problems. And if you have difficulty figuring out just how many kilometers your vehicle is getting to the liter, your service station will probably have a conversion chart to help you.
People mad at metric took their...
But as the changes piled on, many Canadians weren't happy, and there was a big push to drop the conversion.
The campaign against Canada's move to metric tied up the House of Commons for half an hour this afternoon. The Conservatives presented a petition 5.6 kilometers long, or as they put it, 3.5 miles.
It was one of the largest petitions ever collected for presentation to Parliament, and it took 7 Tory MPs to carry it into the House of Commons this morning, so photographers could get pictures of the bundle of anti-metric signatures. And this afternoon, the actual presentation of the petition proved no easy matter.
This petition is 36 inches wide. It's 3.5 miles long. It weighs 247 pounds.
Consumer Affairs Minister Andre Ouellette, who is responsible for administering the metric conversion program, wasn't impressed.
The petition presented today is the result of false and misleading representation and information.
Ouellette says he will now write a letter to everyone who signed the petition in an effort to convince them of the merits of metric.
Fast forward a few years later, and it seemed like Canadians were even more confused by the conversion, at least according to this poll CBC reported on.
Metric conversion is very difficult for 39% of those surveyed. That's slightly higher than the 31% who expected it to be tough 10 years ago, before the metric system was introduced. Anti-metric crusader Jack Halpert says the poll just confirms that people don't want to convert.
They don't like the way it was forced on them, and therefore they've gotten their dander up and decided, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to learn it, I want to stick to the old measure.
The Federal Metric Commission says it will all be easier when the changeover is complete.
We see metric all around us, but we still see imperial, so we're really at the height of a transition phase.
Whatever the polls say, the federal government is resolved to continue the move to metric and expects to complete the conversion and dismantle the Metric Commission in a year and a half.
One of the big metric mishaps became known as the Gimli glider. In 1983, an Air Canada flight from Montreal to Edmonton made an emergency landing at a Manitoba airfield after running out of fuel. Remarkably, the plane made a safe emergency landing at an airstrip near Gimli, Manitoba, about 90 kilometers north of Winnipeg.
Air Canada says the people who refueled the 767 in Montreal made a mistake when converting the weight and volume of the fuel into metric. The airline says from now on, 767s will not be allowed to take off if the fuel gauge isn't working. All fuel measurement procedures are being reviewed, and all training programs for the 767 will be re-examined and strengthened.
Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's government eventually ended the Metric Commission and made the switchover voluntary. South of the border, America had started testing road signs in kilometers under President Jimmy Carter, who supported efforts to go metric. That was until the early 80s when President Ronald Reagan torpedoed the Metric Act and Metric Board to save money. But there are some American industries who use it, like NASA.
In fact, that led to some catastrophic issues with the Mars Climate Orbiter in 1999. When they tried to send it to Mars, the manufacturer had reported measures in imperial units, pounds per square inch, and they were expecting newtons, which is a metric equivalent, and it didn't work. The Mars Climate Orbiter burned up when it reached Mars, and with it $100 million and more in development.
The metric system is now used by virtually every country in the world, and it's the scientific standard, especially in meteorology circles.
You know, it has been from day one. So there was no problem from a scientific bent organization, but it was the public acceptance of it that was the challenge.
Even after the switch, imperial units have crept back. Height is often measured in feet and inches, and weight in pounds. You can thank our neighbors to the south, who remain the one true outlier. But don't try asking a Canadian kid nowadays what the temperature is in Fahrenheit.
So I remember when my daughter said to me once when I was explaining something in temperature, and she said, well, could you, what would that be in Celsius? And I thought, oh my gosh, it's working. The new generation has got it, and I felt so proud as a parent.
Are you proud of knowing the metric system, Mr. Darius Badavi?
I am. I can't imagine using Fahrenheit.
No, or 40 rods to the hog's head. There's some interesting metric things out there.
Yeah.
Simpsons reference.
No idea.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
A quick thing about Fahrenheit. Fun fact, Fahrenheit was developed by Daniel Gabriel Fahrenheit 301 years ago, based on another scale developed by a Danish person who decided that 0 on his scale would be the coldest it ever gets in Denmark, which I think is a really arbitrary way to determine what 0 on your scale is.
And is, at least in Celsius, completely untrue.
Yeah, I think Celsius is 0 to 100, boiling, freezing, freezing, boiling, makes a lot more sense. Okay, let's talk about the weather now. We've got high pressure building in over BC, which means that we're only getting clearer, drier, and sunnier over the next few days. You'll notice a few more showers and flurries taking place mostly across southern BC over the next 24 hours or so before we dry out entirely. Again, maybe tonight some showers continuing into early tomorrow morning on the south coast and parts of the interior. Maybe getting some flurries in parts of the southern interior as well, because snow levels are getting down quite close to valley bottom tonight. Then as we get into tomorrow night, again, maybe a couple odd showers in southern BC, but for the most part, dry and getting warmer as we head into the weekend. Now this does reach far enough, it didn't yesterday, that we can start to see those temperatures come up, especially once we get into Friday. Abbotsford getting up to 17 degrees. Abbotsford will probably continue to climb, as will the rest of the southern, much of the southern interior, to around 20 degrees, maybe even the low 20s by the weekend. So expect a very sunny and pleasant weekend. I know Environment Canada is calling for some showers on Sunday, although I don't think is going to happen. Maybe some more cloud builds in, but I think the showers will hold off until early next week. Here you can see, again, lots of sunshine building in, but still in the southeast, a little bit of showery, flurry-y activity lingering in parts of the interior, especially the southeast. Again, risk of a thunderstorm in the Kootenays tomorrow. And here's our 5-day forecast, Dan. Again, lots of sunshine building in, and let's hope that rain holds off.
Okay. Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Nobody generally likes somebody else looking over their shoulder while they're driving, but this BC man made an exception for that exceptional passenger. The story coming up.
Murray Zelt has spent more than 10 years admiring and taking pictures of great gray owls from afar.
But last month, he was out photographing one of the majestic birds when the unthinkable happened. It was hit by a car. So Zelt came swooping down to save the day.
Well, this has been an interesting trip out to work today. Got a passenger with me now. Just laying in the middle of the road there, obviously hurt, couldn't fly. So I'm just going to bring it into town and get it checked out.
We managed to reach out to Owl down in Delta, and they're willing to take it and, rehab it once we kind of fix it up a little bit. So we wanted to release it into the same spot. Just before we started drumming, we could hear another owl in the background. Must have had some kind of sense that this other owl was around. So it was really pretty remarkable. Yeah.
Okay, here you go, buddy.
And then I got on the other side of the barbed wire fence and opened up the kennel, and it seemed like it didn't want to go at first, but I'm trying to tell it, no, it's okay to go, it's okay to go. And
where am I?
Oh, yay! And it flew, maybe 25 feet and landed on a down tree, and then kind of looked at us for a bit, and then after that, I think it made its way further back into the bush. So
good rescue. We should clarify. Zelt says he knows people are not supposed to pick up wildlife and put them in their car if you see them injured, so he understands he broke the rules, but he's thankful the animal survived, which is great. We actually have some breaking news we want to share with you on the campaign trail. A candidate in the federal running for New Westminster, Burnaby, Millardville is out. The Conservative campaign tells CBC that Lawrence Singh will not be a candidate for the Conservative Party. Two other Conservative candidates also were either dropped or dropped out today, and a Liberal dropped yesterday.
Now, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch the newscast on CBC Gem, YouTube, and our website.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.